Hello everybody, this is JD Legree. Been away for a while, been trying to take care of some things, going through some difficulties right now, and I got other things to do today, but I wanted to make a quick video about the election coming up, the presidential election, and the debates. Now, from the get-go, I'm not going to tell you who to vote for or who not to vote for. This isn't a stand video. I'm not going to stand for one candidate or the other. But there's something I've been wanting to say about what I have been seeing on Twitter and Facebook. I have seen people go out of their way to point out or disrespect each candidate, pointing out mistakes or flawed opinions or whatever to disqualify that person as being a good candidate for the presidency. There's the anti-Romney memes and the anti-Obama memes and dissing Obamacare and all that shit. But one thing I saw that grabbed my attention was something Lupe Fiasco, the rapper, said. He says that he doesn't vote, and the reason why he doesn't vote is because he feels that the American political system and process is a bunch of bullshit. Well, he didn't say a bunch of bullshit. Not that he doesn't curse, but he didn't say that particular usage of words. But that was basically the opinion that he voiced on his profile. And D.L. Hughley tried to call himself dissing Lupe for saying that he doesn't vote. And Lupe was like, you know what? How about this? How about instead of looking toward people to elect to fix shit, how about we put our own money up and start something? So he challenged DL to put up $50,000 along with Lupe to start something. But DL never, responded to that particular part of Lupe's comment. He just kept going down on him for saying that he didn't vote. Now, one may say, if you don't vote, you don't get the right. You don't have the right to complain, or that too many people have lost their lives and fought for the right to be able to vote. And there is, that is a valid point that a lot of people, blacks first, at least in this country, and then women fought long and hard to have their vote counted as much as white men. But nobody asks why a person comes to the conclusion that voting doesn't matter, right? So instead of asking Lupe, why do you feel that way, they just diss the guy. And I'm going to attempt to explain possibly why Lupe feels the way he feels. He's not too much older than I am. I'm 24. He's around he's in his 20s as well. So that means he's old enough to have seen Bush 41. Bush 43, because Bush 41 is Herbert Walker Bush. Bush 43 was W. Bush. He's old enough to see Bush be elected president by the Supreme Court. Alright? Not by the populist vote and not by the Electoral College, but by the Supreme Court. Because if you remember the whole Florida atrocity, basically, of voters being turned away and not able to count votes and shit, all that mess. So basically, despite the fact that Al Gore had the populist votes, Bush became president because of the Supreme Court. So he saw that. He saw our military and government go from saying that it was Osama bin Laden and the Taliban, not Al Qaeda, but the Taliban and bin Laden was responsible for 9/11, and that they were in Afghanistan. See our military efforts go from Afghanistan all of a sudden focusing on Iraq, and the Bush administration saying that Iraq not only had ties to 9/11, but also had weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, and all that shit. Get over there, and there's nothing of the sort. And what was supposed to be a year max engagement lasted 5-6 years. Actually longer, because I think Obama called the truce back in 2010. So that was basically 7 years engaged in a war that they lied about. Okay. And then he sees Bush, when he was going up for re-election, basically used the platform of who you going to vote for, the devil you know or the devil you don't know, try to slander Senator Kerry's military record, where he himself did everything he could not to be in the front lines of actual fighting, because he was old enough. He was in service. He was either in the National Guard or something, the Army Reserve. He was in something like that during the Vietnam War, and so he used his connections, aka his daddy, to basically dodge action, whereas Senator Kerry was actually injured in the Vietnam War several times. And then he gets reelected. Then he sees our government from the top to the very bottom mismanaged Katrina, not just with New Orleans, but all around that South Coast. Devastation. Taking them 4 or 5 days to get food and water there. People drowning in the streets and stuff. And it took them days to get there. It's not like we're talking about some distant country or some village that's up in the mountains, and it's, you have to walk on foot climbing 10,000 feet. We're talking about areas that you can get to in a day, in hours with planes. So he sees that. He sees none of the Bush administration get charged. I have charges brought against him for bringing about the Patriot Act, which is unconstitutional, potentially war crimes because of the torture and things like the Downing Street memo, where it detailed how to go about drumming up public support for war, and the reasons used to justify the war turned out to be at best incorrect, at worst known fabrications. Nobody was brought up on charges against that. Obama was asked about that, and he said he wasn't going to do that, talking about it was time to turn the page. I'm like, there are hundreds of thousands of Iraqi citizens that are dead because of that bullshit. That's not something you just turn the page from. So he sees all these things going on, and he comes to the conclusion, like as I did, that you know what, it really doesn't fucking matter who's voted in for president and who isn't. Those in power are going to do whatever is necessary to keep the state in power, or to strengthen their power. That's how it's always been. That's how it's always going to be. Now that doesn't mean that everybody who's in power is a selfish bastard, or inconsiderate, or has no heart. Because there have been kings and queens and presidents who have done their best to look out for as many people as possible. Nobody is flawless. You're never going to find a flawless leader. So I don't want people thinking that I'm bashing power totally, and saying that power is synonymous with evil. It's just that the overwhelming majority of those who have been in power in human history have behaved in a way to solidify their own power for as long as possible, by whatever it takes. So you know, we look at our system. How come, except in my lifetime, there's only been one, I think there's only been one time, maybe twice, that there was a legitimate third option in a presidential election. Like, how come nobody questions the fact that we only have two parties? You know, nobody questions the fact that whenever a time, whether it's presidential election or even a mayoral, a mayor election or city council, there's only two real major parties, Democrat and Republican. How come there's no serious independent candidates for any of these elected official positions? And as far as the presidency is concerned, I think Ralph Nader in either 92 or 96 was like one of the few times there was a legitimate, at least for a little while, third option. How come you don't ever see any support for an independent presidential election? You never see that shit. It's always Democrat or Republican, and it's the same shit over and over again. If a Republican gets elected president, then the Democrats start bitching and moaning and saying, oh, it's the Republican controlled Congress, we can't get shit done because all this motherfucker is going to do is just do everything according to his party's goals. Then if a Democrat gets elected president, then the Republicans start bitching and saying, oh, we want to do this, but the president keeps vetoing our he keeps no, actually no, I'm sorry, they can veto the president. I think the president can do something to override the veto. Oh yeah, he can use executive. He can use his executive privilege to get shit done without having to go through Congress. So it's like, oh, we keep vetoing the president, but he keeps overriding us, totally going against the checks and balances of that was established in the Constitution. But the thing that really gets me is with these damn debates. Like, you seen people being wrapped with attention with these presidential debates, focusing on facial expressions and drinking water and all kinds of bullshit. I'm like, do people really think that 2-minute responses to questions really give you an idea of how that person is going to actually lead if elected? Do people really still think that? Anybody with intelligence would know that no matter what concept it is, no matter what the topic is, in order to give a full detailed explanation of the positives, the negatives, and possible unforeseen negative circumstances that can happen with the implementation of something, you would need a lot more than 2 minutes. So the fact that even to this fucking day that these jackasses still hold weight to the idea of standing two people in front of a camera reading shit from memory that was condensed to 2 minutes really makes a big deal. Don't people realize that politicians in general are either A, going to say things according to their base, or 2, going to say things that nobody would disagree with? Like, basically, like the argument of sounding right. You're going to present something in a way that people won't disagree with or reject. So that way, there's nothing to rally against. Kind of like the straw man argument. Basically, you take somebody else's you take your opponent's statement, twist it in a certain way to knock that down, and then you come off seeing as having won the argument. It doesn't fucking matter who wins the debate. The only thing that fucking matters is how a person governs. Alright, and you're not going to be able to tell how a motherfucker governs from 2-minute responses. Why can't people see that shit? And then you got these assholes, you know, when they see you say kind of shit like that, they wanna ask you, are you even going to vote? Are you even registered? What fucking difference does it make? To answer the question, yes, I am registered. I do plan on voting. But as I had to tell this guy on Facebook, you know, whether or not a person votes doesn't mean that their opinion is invalidated because they don't vote or even register to vote. Because the point is, for the most part, those in power are going to do what it takes to stay in power and solidify it. Alright? That's what they're going to do. You're really going to see the changes that are necessary, beginning with the president. Like that, you're really going to see the president do something, you know, groundbreaking. Alright, you're really going to see that, because human nature is such where it resists change. I think everybody knows that. So even change that's necessary, it can be hard to invoke it because you're used to certain things. And so when you're talking about changing shit up, people are gonna resist. And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. For example, Facebook, piece of shit website. Mark Zuckerberg decided, you know what? He decided to do two things. He decided to switch up how your stories, appear when you first sign in. Instead of doing from most recent to least recent, he decided to do top stories, which is basically the most commented shit. Like if a person uploads a photo from 12 hours ago and it had 50 comments on it, that's the first thing you see when you log in. Nobody asked for that bullshit. It took the criticism, the overwhelming criticism, for him to say, you know what, okay, let's give people an option to sort it. Because at first they changed it with no option. You had to scroll all the way halfway down your page just to see the minute by minute updates. It took his ass getting criticized for him to say, you know what, maybe we need to give these guys an option of whether or not they want to see most recent stories or top rated stories. And sometimes the things that are rated top rated don't make no damn sense. You'll see something that only has 2 comments, but it's top rated story. Huh? So they had to give people an option to do that. And even to this day, every once in a while when you sign in, you'll see the shit back to the way it was. Even though you didn't tell it to go away from most recent stories, it'll still go back to top stories. You have to click it again. That shit still happens. But you see, jackass Zuckerberg thought of something needed to be changed. He went ahead and implemented it without giving people an option to either say yes or no, or stick to the old way. Bitching and moaning happened, and so he had to compromise. Now, who's to say that if he gave people an option, it wouldn't be as much criticism then? But still, people don't like when you take options away from them, or change shit without at least telling them why you're doing it. I have been getting some complaints about my videos being too long, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down into separate parts. So I'm going to say the title of this video is going to be part 1 of my response, part 1 of my opinions of the upcoming election. So stay tuned for part 2.